Hi, everybody. Vasu Vaddiparty here for the VPartySports Podcast here on this Thursday afternoon, 3 o'clock on the East Coast, 12 o'clock on the West Coast. Bowl games, the NCAA semifinals, Michigan, TCU, Georgia, Ohio State on Saturday. Thursday night football tonight, which we'll get into the full NFL. You'll see the ticker go across the bottom of the NFL lines for Week 17. Lots of playoff ramifications, lots of wild card deals going on, divisions still up for grabs, and a lot of good games here this weekend, including a great Monday night game. We'll hit a little bit on that, but we'll spend a lot more time with this weekend's games. Don't forget, you can reach us directly on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at VPartySports. If you're interested in sponsorships, please contact me directly. Our next show will be Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, ahead of all the bowl games. Good bowl games on Saturday as well, too, before the NFL takes place on Sunday. We have 3 games today. Syracuse and Minnesota already off, and then Oklahoma State, Florida State, and then tonight it will be North Carolina State. It'll be Texas and Washington, and then 5 games tomorrow. I believe if I read that right, 5 games tomorrow for Saturday the 30th, starting at noon. 1, 2, 3. Yep, 5 games on the bowl games, and then of course the Big 4 on Saturday: the Sugar Bowl, the Music City Bowl, and then the semifinals between TCU, Michigan, number 3 and number 2. Number 1, Georgia, will take on Ohio State. The Fiesta Bowl is where TCU, Michigan will be in Glendale, Arizona. Georgia, Ohio State will be in Atlanta at the Peach Bowl. All right, so all the particulars out of the way. Thanks to everybody on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter for joining us. Let's get right to it. Okay, you see the lines going across the bottom. Thursday night football, the Dallas Cowboys, 13.5-point favorites at Tennessee. Lots of ramifications here for both. First of all, Cowboys, technically not out of the NFC East race, so it's going to be very hard. They split after beating the Eagles last week, and they split the season series. Divisionally, which is the next tiebreaker, the Cowboys have the edge. They're 2 back with 2 to go. So all Philly has to do is win one of these last 2. It's over. They've got the best record in the East. They'll win the division. They're a game up on Minnesota. So if they win any game that they win, they will clinch the number 1 seed because they have the tiebreaker over Minnesota as well, too. So Dallas, 11-4, comes into Tennessee, 13.5, 40.5. Here's the problem with Tennessee. Tennessee is playing for first place in their division. They are well out of the playoffs if they don't finish in first place. Jacksonville is 7-8. The Titans are 7-8. Jacksonville thumped them 3 weeks ago. They have a game at the end of the year, not this weekend, the following weekend. Right now, Jacksonville goes to Houston. Tennessee plays tonight. Tennessee has to try and figure out a way to win because Jacksonville has the edge on them. And that game at home for Jacksonville next week against Tennessee. So that's going to be very tough for Tennessee to overcome this. They've lost 5 in a row. They were 7-3 to start this run, and they were pretty much guaranteed an AFC South division. And then 5 in a row. Now Tannehill out. They're not going to Malik Willis. Malik Willis, who started last week, they lost to Houston, did Tennessee. That's what put them in this position, in Jacksonville in first place. They're going with Joshua Dobbs. Raise your hand if you know where Joshua Dobbs is from. I'll tell you, he's from the University of Tennessee. He was at Pittsburgh for a couple of years behind Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph, and now he's at Tennessee. Now he's getting his first NFL start against the Dallas Cowboys defense. On top of that, if it's not all bad after that, Derrick Henry is doubtful for tonight. NFL's top rusher, doubtful for tonight against the Cowboys. They're getting 13.5 points at home, 40.5 the total. May not be a lot of points in this game. Dak Prescott has shown that he can turn the ball over quite a bit. He's had a lot of red zone turnovers. He's had a lot of fumbles the last 4 weeks. They are 11-4, but a lot of that has to do with their defense. Their offense has scored points, but they've made critical mistakes in the red zone. But 11-4 is where they're at, 2 games back of the Eagles. Somehow Tennessee pulls this out. They pull themselves back into a tie, forces Jacksonville, who goes to Houston on Sunday, to try and win, maintain their first place standing as well. So lots of ramifications tonight. By the way, remember, 13.5 points, anything over a touchdown in the NFL to begin with. But now you're laying nearly 2 touchdowns on the road at an NFL City. I remember Malik Willis, most of you will remember this, started against Kansas City on the road. They were 14.5-point underdogs. They ended up losing in overtime, so clearly they covered that game. In terms of the game itself. Let me give you a little numbers here wise, point spread wise. Cowboys 9-5 against the spread. Titans 8-6-1. This 5-game losing streak, I think they've only covered once in that 5 games. Let me see here if I got this right. Tennessee, they pushed against the Chargers, got beat up by Jacksonville, they got beat up by Philadelphia, and they lost to Cincinnati at home, and they were an underdog at home, but Cincinnati did cover that game as well. Dallas, meanwhile, they beat Philadelphia. They lost to Jacksonville. The only time they didn't cover against Houston. They whooped up on Indianapolis, and they did not cover against the Giants. So we're looking at we're looking at 3 out of the last 5 that have not covered. And the Giants game, they were an 11.5-point favorite on Thanksgiving night. They creamed the Colts. Houston gave them a battle. Houston's given teams battle the last 3 weeks. And then Jacksonville, Dak threw too many interceptions, but it's given Jacksonville the impetus to stay in first place. And then Gardner Minshew started for Philadelphia last week, though they did give up 34 points to the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's a concern for the Cowboys and their fan base as well as Jerry Jones. So that's where we're at tonight, 13.5. Tennessee, 40.5. The 40.5 the line for Tennessee tonight. In terms of what we said, the NFL, as we said, Dobbs looks like he's going to start for Tennessee. Parsons questionable. Speaking of Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are questionable. Carson Wentz is starting for the Washington Commanders. They need a win to maintain their wild card standing. They're in 7th right now. Carolina looks to sweep Tampa Bay for first place. Green Bay hosts Minnesota. They're trying to get into a playoff spot after their win over Miami on Christmas Day. Minnesota trying to hold off San Francisco for the number 2 spot. And the 49ers will go to Vegas. Derek Carr has been benched. That's a big story. Jarrett Stidham going to start the last 2 games for the Raiders. Derek Carr not even going to be with the team. He doesn't want to be a distraction, so he's going to be gone, and he's forced himself out. All right, more NFL news. The Jags at Texans. Don't forget, Tennessee just lost to Houston on the road. Texans playing well. Don't know what they're going to do in 2023, but the fact the Texans are playing well, the Cowboys game for 1, beating Tennessee last week for 2. And Jacksonville is 7-8. They're not a great team, but they are in first place in that South. And the Texans have been playing spoilers so far these last 3 weeks. The Seattle Seahawks, they may need a little bit of a miracle here. They are in 8th place. They're ahead of the Lions. They beat the Lions earlier in the year, so they're going to stay ahead of them. They need Washington to lose 1 of 2 games and for them to win. Therefore, Seattle will get into the playoffs. The Giants, they beat the Giants, so they have the opportunity to overtake the Giants if the Giants lose 2 straight. Seahawks have 8 losses. The Giants have 6 losses. If they can lose 2 games, if all they got to do is win 1 game for the Giants, they're in the wild card. But anyway, I know it seems like we're all over the place, but that's the way it is in the NFL. Everybody's looking around at all the ramifications. So we'll go conference by conference here. In the East, you know the scenario for the Eagles. 1 win. They've got the best record in the division. In the North, Minnesota's clinched. They need a win to maintain the number 2 spot, at least for temporarily for San Francisco. San Francisco going to Vegas. They're at 11-4. They have the tiebreaker edge over Minnesota. And the Carolina-Tampa Bay play this weekend. You see the lines going across. We'll get to the games in a second. Carolina, Tampa Bay. Carolina runs the table. They're going to end up winning that division. Tampa Bay, New Orleans, and Atlanta will be out. New Orleans needs a lot of help to get into that number 1 spot in the NFC South. And then the NFC West, the 49ers have clinched. They're trying to get a number 2 spot. In the AFC, Buffalo will go to Cincinnati on Monday night. We'll talk about that. They have the 1 seed. Miami, who lost last week to Green Bay, still holding that 7th spot at 8-7. The Chargers won last week, so they've clinched. So there's only 1 spot left. Patriots, Jets, 7-8. Jets are playing Seattle this week. How about that? The Geno Smith Bowl. Geno Smith, a backup with the Jets for all those years, now is a Pro Bowl quarterback for the Seahawks, though their defense has let them down. Geno Smith has been great, but now he's a Pro Bowler for Seattle. In the AFC North, Cincinnati, they host Buffalo Monday night, as we said. Baltimore got into the playoffs last week with their win. Now they host Pittsburgh tonight. They have the tiebreaker edge over Cincinnati, and they play the Bengals one more time on the final weekend of the season in Cincinnati. So Cincinnati has Buffalo and then Baltimore, but they're hoping for a Cincinnati loss. They're rooting for Buffalo. Shocking that the Ravens would root for the Buffalo Bills, but here you are. Cincinnati 11-4, Baltimore 10-5. Baltimore with the tiebreaker. They still have an outside shot at the division. Depends on what happens with Cincinnati. Cincinnati can still get the number 1 spot. Here's how they can get the number 1 spot. Kansas City has to lose at least once. The Bengals have to run the table. By beating Buffalo, they'll have the head-to-head over Buffalo, and they have the head-to-head over Kansas City. So Cincinnati could get the number 1 spot. The odds are long against that because Kansas City has to host. Kansas City's hosting Denver after Nathaniel Hackett just got fired. Denver at 4-11 right now, and they lost last week to the Rams. They got thumped by the Rams 51-14. The North Division, as we said, Cincinnati leading by a game. Baltimore has the tiebreaker. Jacksonville and Tennessee, you know that story. Tennessee plays tonight. Jacksonville will go to Houston this weekend. Don't underestimate the Texans in that defense. They played well the last 3 weeks. Both are tied, but Jacksonville has the tiebreaker over Tennessee. And then Kansas City, number 2 seed right now in the AFC. They're even with Buffalo. They lost to Buffalo, so they will lose that tiebreaker automatically. So they need Buffalo to lose for them to get the 1 seed. And then they've got to hope Cincinnati falls behind them as well because they've already lost to the Bengals this year. So there you have it. Wild card standings, as we said. Baltimore's in. They won last week. The Chargers are in with their win last Monday night over the Colts. Miami in the 7th spot at 8-7, a game ahead of New England. It's a big game for them. They're playing the Patriots this weekend. This could be a big game for the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins early in the year, they played the Patriots on opening day. They beat them. So this is a chance for New England to exact some revenge. Divisionally, this will give New England the edge at 3-2 division-wise, and Miami will fall into the 8th spot. The Jets are playing Seattle. They're 2-3 in the division. They've lost to New England. They beat Miami. So in the head-to-head round robin, it favors New England right now if they all end up tied. So that's where we're at right now. Tennessee at 7-8, Pittsburgh at 7-8, mathematically still in it. Not in the wild card for Tennessee, but in the division for Tennessee. Pittsburgh 7-8. They beat New England. They've also played the Jets. They did not play the Jets. I know they beat New England. Let me go through this here. They lost to the Jets. They beat New England. But they lost to New England and they lost to the Jets. So they're going to have a tough time. They're going to have a tough time getting in. So pretty much Pittsburgh might be done. So here we go. That's where we're at for the NFL. Games this weekend. Let's get to the lines here. You see them at the bottom. Let's get to them real quick. As we said, 2-touchdown favorite, a lot for Dallas at Tennessee, 40.5 the total. Give you best bets at the end. Tampa Bay, 3 versus Carolina Sunday. First place in the NFC South there. Washington trying to hold off the 7th seed. 2-point favorite over the Cleveland Browns, 40.5. Philadelphia trying to get that 1 seed. New Orleans still trying to play for that division. Have to have a lot of things happen. 6-point favorite. Hurts questionable. A.J. Brown questionable for the Eagles. Atlanta, 3.5 versus Arizona, throwaway game. Huge game, Jacksonville at Houston. Jacksonville for first place, trying to hold off Tennessee. Houston's played well the last 3 weeks. Detroit, here's an interesting scenario with Detroit. Detroit behind Seattle at 7-8. They lost to Seattle, but they beat the Giants. They did not play the Commanders. I believe they did play the Commanders. So they beat the Commanders and they beat the Giants. So they need both of them to lose and to win for them to have a chance to overtake Seattle, Washington, and the Giants. So Detroit very much in it. 6-point favorite. Hi, raise your hand, Lions fans. How'd you think you'd be in the playoff hunt week 17 of the NFL? Usually after Thanksgiving, your season's done. You play the Thanksgiving game. Everybody sees you on national TV. And here you are fighting out for a playoff spot. The loss to Seattle hurt, but you did beat Washington, and you did beat the Giants. So you're rooting for the Jets. You're rooting for the Cleveland Browns. And you're rooting for the New York Giants are playing where's the Giants game here? The Giants are playing Indianapolis. We'll get to those games in a second. So you got to root for Indianapolis as well, too. And that's your scenario for getting in. All right, that's the NFL. Jacksonville at Houston, Detroit, Chicago, New England trying to get in. That's a big game versus Miami. Kansas City, 13-point favorite over Denver. They're playing for the 1 seed. AFC West wrapped up. Jerry Rosburg, the interim coach now for Denver. They're looking at new coaches for 2023. A lot of names already been thrown out there after Nathaniel Hackett got fired. Gave up 51 points to a Rams team that's just awful this year. But give Baker Mayfield credit. He's resurrected himself depending on what the Rams decide to do. Matthew Stafford a little long in the tooth, and he is injured. He's gotten injured his whole career. Not saying that he's going to be gone, but Baker Mayfield has made a case for himself. Definitely, if not with the Rams, then the other 31 teams as well too. Giants, we told you their story. 8-6-1. They've got a game up on the Washington Commanders. They're in 6th. That tie game really helped the Giants now. They are both 1-3, 1-3-1 in the division though, so that doesn't help them division-wise. But they've got the Indianapolis Colts. They're a 6-point favorite. The Jets are a 1.5-point favorite. Really, the 1.5-point favorite at Seattle. I know they need the game, but I'm not sure that the Jets should be favored in this game. Seattle's been leaking oil. 42.5 might be low in that game. San Francisco, Derek Carr benched for the Raiders. Jarrett Stidham going to start the final 2 games. Could be the end of Derek Carr in Las Vegas. He's not even going to be with the team. He doesn't want to be a distraction to the team. 10-point favorite for the 49ers, who are still going after the number 2 seed. 41.5 the total. Green Bay, talked about their playoff spot, 3.5 versus Minnesota. 48 the total. Don't sleep on the Vikings. They need to maintain that number 2 spot to get 2 home games. Green Bay on a roll right now. One more win and a couple of things with the Washington team and the Detroit team and the New York Giants. They lost to all 3 of them, so they're going to need all 3 of them to lose. Somehow, if they get in, I got a feeling there's a lot of defensive coordinators in the NFC that are going to have a lot of fear for Aaron Rodgers once they get into the playoffs. But a win by the Giants, the Commanders, and the Lions will certainly hurt the cause for the Green Bay Packers. Chargers, they won last week over the Colts on Monday night. They're hosting the Rams in the Battle of SoFi. 6.5-point favorites for the Chargers, 43 the total. Baltimore, Sunday night, they flexed that game in versus Pittsburgh. A win will put pressure on Cincinnati over Pittsburgh for Monday night, as Cincinnati will host Buffalo. Cincinnati needs 2 wins, basically, to get the number 1 seed because they've beaten Buffalo and Kansas City. All right, are you confused yet? The NFL and the ramifications, the way they go at it. We'll give you the best bet segment as we hit it. Let's hit the BCS here real quick before we go. Saturday's BCS semifinals, Georgia is 7, 62.5. That line has stayed pretty similar. That's the Fiesta Bowl, 4:30 Eastern Saturday. The number 2 Michigan Wolverines versus the number 3 TCU Horned Frogs. TCU's offense has been very good all year. Michigan's defense has been great. Donovan Edwards has come in for Blake Corum. They've run the ball a lot better from a speed standpoint than they have in the previous 6 weeks. So now they've had 3 weeks off since the Big Ten championship. TCU coming in off that Big 12 championship loss versus Kansas State. Georgia, 7-point favorite over Ohio State. Ohio State's got a great offense. The defense has not been good this year. Georgia's defense has been outstanding. Stetson Bennett, I think he overcame a lot of detractors, finished 4th in the Heisman ballot, was in New York to witness C.J. Stroud get the Heisman Trophy. But they've got a great running game offensively. They're not as good as Ohio State. They're probably on par with Ohio State. They have scored a lot of points, though. Defensively, they are better than the other 3 teams here defensively. And it's going to be an interesting Saturday for these games. But there are other bowl games to go out. We'll hit that real quick here. The winners will meet January 9th at the aforementioned SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, where the Chargers and Rams are playing. All right, bowl games today. Florida State, 10-point favorite versus Oklahoma, 65.5. Texas, 3 over Washington, 67.5. The Florida State-Oklahoma game is the Cheez-It Bowl. I believe that's in Orlando, Florida. And then the Texas-Washington is the Valero Alamo Bowl. That will be in San Antonio, Texas tonight. 5 games tomorrow listed. North Carolina State and Maryland will be in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Mayonnaise. They don't dump Gatorade. They dump mayonnaise on you. That's in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hometown game for North Carolina State. UCLA versus Pitt in the Sun Bowl. That's in El Paso, Texas. 7.5 for UCLA. 54 the total. Notre Dame and South Carolina. That's the Gator Bowl. That's in Florida. That'll be in Jacksonville, Florida. 3.5, 3 right there. 50.5 for Notre Dame over South Carolina. Ohio University, Wyoming. Ohio University 2.5, and the total 41.5. It's going to be televised on Barstool Sports. You have to get online to find them. But that game in Tucson, Arizona, Ohio University and Wyoming. And then finally, the Orange Bowl. Neither quarterback's going to be there. DJ Uiagalelei transferred to Oregon State. He won't be there. And Clemson, Tennessee's Hendon Hooker, who was a Heisman candidate midway through the year, he's hurt. He's out for the rest of the year. So it's going to be backup quarterbacks for Clemson and Tennessee. Clemson's defense has played well all year. Tennessee had a shot at number 1 early in the year after the win over Alabama. 6 for Clemson. They're favored by 6, 63.5 the total. That is the Capital One Orange Bowl, and that is in Miami. Lots of oranges to be thrown around there. Clemson and Tennessee, the first 2 teams that have both been orange to play in the Orange Bowl since, I think, 1933. How about that for a little known fact? So there you have it. You're all set up for bowl games. We'll go to tomorrow's Saturday's show. We'll preview all the bowl games for Saturday, the semifinal games, and then we'll give you a little taste of the NFL as well. When we come back in 1 minute, we'll talk a little NBA. We'll talk a little NCAA basketball, some good games as conference play starts across the land in the NCAA basketball. This is Vasu Vaddiparty, the VPartySports Podcast, with you 3 times a week. We'll be back Saturday, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific with a full NFL preview. NBA, NCAA games abound, bowl previews as well. The Daily Post will be out every day, weekdays 6 Eastern, on the weekends by 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern. And if you're interested in sponsorships, please contact me through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Also subscribe to us on YouTube as well. We thank you for your support for everybody. And if you missed any of the replay, you get them every hour on the hour until kickoffs and tip-offs tonight until 7 o'clock Eastern on this Thursday. Back in 1 minute with a little NBA, college basketball to go over. The VPartySports Podcast with you. I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. See you. Welcome back to the VPartySports Podcast. Vasu Vaddiparty here on this Thursday afternoon. If you missed any of the previous segments, talking about the NFL, talking about the NCAA bowl games, semifinal Saturday, you can get to it on replay on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Just subscribe, download. We like the views. We like the comments. Looking forward to reading all the comments that you have for us as well. Thanks to everybody that's on with us right now. All right, we talked about the NFL, Thursday Night Football. Dallas, the 13.5-point favorite at Tennessee. Derrick Henry, very doubtful tonight. Joshua Dobbs from the third-string quarterback will start tonight, possibly. I think it's like 90% sure he's going to start over Malik Willis. He didn't move the offense at all. Ryan Tannehill out still. A big game for Tennessee. They're fighting Jacksonville for the AFC South spot. Dallas trying to catch Philadelphia. They're going to need Philadelphia to lose twice and Dallas to win twice for them to catch the NFC East. But they are well entrenched in the playoff spot. They are the number 5 seed right now, ahead of Washington and ahead of the Giants and Washington, both teams from their division. They both have tiebreakers over them, so they're pretty much guaranteed the 5th spot in the playoffs. So, and then Tennessee and Jacksonville. We told you about Jacksonville. Jacksonville in first place. Tennessee needs this game to stay with Jacksonville in the AFC South because they ain't going to make it. If they lose, they ain't going to make it out of a wild card spot. There's too many teams ahead of them that are taking place right now. All right, we move on to the NBA. The NBA lines, you see the college lines and the NBA lines going across right there. The NBA tonight, few games. Charlotte is 1 over Oklahoma City, 239. Cleveland 5 at Indiana, 223. The Boston Celtics, the Doc Rivers Bowl, even though Doc Rivers is nowhere near. Boston Celtics will host the Clippers, 7 as the point spread, 228 the total. Clippers on a roll on the road. They beat Toronto. They beat Detroit. They lost to Philadelphia, but this road trip is successful. Memphis, who's lost 2 in a row, they're 3.5 at Toronto. They want to check that game for injuries. I'm looking to see right now. Fred VanVleet may be questionable. Koloko questionable, and Precious Achiuwa is out. Memphis has lost their road game to the Warriors on Christmas Day. They lost to Phoenix at home. So they're 3.5 at Toronto, 229. The Knicks are 5.5 at San Antonio, 225.5. How about the Knicks? We'll get to that in a second because Luka had the most unbelievable comeback I've ever seen in a game. Down 9 with 33 seconds. We'll go into that. But the Knicks try and rebound 5.5 at San Antonio, 225.5 for the Spurs. Dallas coming off that game versus the Knicks, a 10-point favorite over Houston, 226 the total. Luka coming off the big 60-point, 21 rebound, 10 assist game. Dallas Mavericks were down 9 with 33 seconds left in overtime. They win in overtime, but Luka intentionally missed a free throw. Doncic got the rebound, hit an improbable three to send it to overtime, and then they end up winning the game over the Knicks, 126 to 121. They end up pushing. If you had the Knicks +5, you got lucky it was a push, but you should have won that game. But Luka was incredible. 60 points, 21 rebounds, 10 assists. Not your ordinary triple-double, as triple-doubles go. Indiana Pacers, the Bucks lose to the Bulls in overtime last night. That's weird from that standpoint because the Bucks do not play well on the road. The Bulls are on all sorts of internal strife. They're trying to figure out if they're going to trade DeMar DeRozan, what they're going to do with the combination of DeRozan and Levine. New Orleans still in the mix there in the West. They hold off Minnesota by a point. As we said, Boston hosts the Clippers. The Pacers are hot at home. They've got the Cavaliers. They're a 5-point underdog. They play well at home, so I would be looking at the Pacers for tonight as well. College basketball, you see the Big East, you see them going across to the bottom, but we're going to go through the conference games since conference play started. In the Big East, Butler hosting Providence, 140.5. In Big East play, DePaul, 4.5 versus Georgetown. Conference play started a few weeks ago. Everybody, I think, has a game in. Look at the standings right now in the Big East. Let's see. They played 3 games in the Big East. Connecticut 3-0, Xavier 3-0, Providence 2-0, and then Marquette, Creighton, Villanova, St. John's, Butler 0-2, DePaul 0-2, Georgetown 0-2. So Butler 3-point favorite over Providence, who's undefeated in conference right now, and then DePaul, Georgetown, both teams 0-2 in their respective conference play. Moving on to the Big Ten. Big Ten, Iowa 4 at Nebraska. That's the only conference game. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 games. The conference play gets going this weekend. The only conference game is Iowa -4 at Nebraska. Nebraska plays well at home. They gave Purdue, the number 1 team in the country, a tough game before losing in overtime. Everybody's played 2 games in conference with Purdue and Wisconsin, both 2-0, leading the way in the Big Ten. All right, in the Pac-12, they get going as well. They've had conference games already. Utah, California. Utah at Berkeley tonight, 10.5 for Utah. Cal has been awful. They're 1-12. Utah 9-4, 128.5 the total. And here in Palo Alto, near where I am, I'm in San Jose, but near where I am, near Palo Alto, Stanford, a 2-point favorite over Colorado. Colorado's very good. They beat Tennessee early in the year this year. And you look at the standings, everybody's played a couple of games in conference play already. Arizona State is very good. UCLA is very good. USC is 2-0. Utah is 2-0. Everybody else 1-1 or 0-2. So that's what you have. And then the WCC, you've got some interesting matchups in the WCC. Of course, we know the most famous team in the WCC is Gonzaga. But 4 games tonight in the WCC. Portland University is a 2-point favorite, 150 the total versus Loyola Marymount, who can score. BYU on the road at UOP, 6.5, 150.5 the total. BYU can score as well. And then Santa Clara, which one am I missing here? San Diego and St. Mary's. San Diego and St. Mary's, so I have that here. Santa Clara is 2.5 at 10 o'clock. That's where I am as well, too. 2.5 versus USF, 150.5 the total. Also, the last game, St. Mary's, 10-4. They're a 15.5-point favorite against the University of San Diego. My guy, Steve Lavin, coaching down there. They're 7-7 in his first year back, but St. Mary's very good, and that's another WCC game. Standings-wise, no conference games. Conference play opens tonight with 8 teams going, and then through the weekend, we'll have them there as well. All right, we will have Best Bets segment for you, but they'll be posted 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock on the West Coast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. There are no bowl games early before that I like, so we're going to post them. Check out Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube to get the Best Bet segment, the never duplicated, unprecedented, world-famous Best Bet segment for the VPartySports Podcast. We'll see you Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. on the Pacific time zone. Big day of college football, the BCS semifinals, a preview of the NFL. We'll talk a little NBA, NCAA, NHL as they head into the new year. So hope your holiday week is going great. I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. Have a great afternoon. See you Saturday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific for the VParty Sports Podcast. Take care, everybody.